take us through just how odd and how revolutionary and just so much of a cultural phenomenon Sesame Street was when it was really first kicking off?
Well, in the era where Sesame Street was born, as you know, the late 60s were a really tumultuous time in this country. And there was a lot of protests and a lot of consciousness raising around the war and around civil rights. And from this, many activists were formed. And this group in particular of activists started Sesame Street. And it really came out of all these movements to highlight things like the gap in education between children in the inner city and children in the suburbs, and the gap in education with children of color and white kids, and all of these issues. The fact that it came out in a show for preschoolers, to me, is amazing and delicious, and one of the things that made this project so irresistible.
I mean, and what led you to this project as well, to the producers? Yeah.
Well, I was a Sesame Street kid growing up, and I remember watching the show with my dad and my mom, and in our basement in Long Island, and just loving this amazing place, this world that was built. And I think that one of the things that, as Ellen and I grew our company Macrocosm, it's all about world building and showcasing worlds that were built and finding those projects that we were really very passionate about. So I read Michael's book, and as a kid who loved Sesame Street so much, and then as an adult, I thought, oh, I know everything about Sesame Street. I know all the Muppets, and I know everybody. But there were so many stories that I was absolutely blown away by. And if, as sort of a bigger fan of the show, if I didn't know these stories, I had a good idea that lots of other people didn't know really the struggle that it was to create this show. Now we see Sesame Street as an institution. It's like oxygen. Sesame's always with us. But back then, it was this ragtag group of people that really were trying something truly, experimental.
Yeah, and it was in reading Michael's book again. What I responded to, of course, I grew up on Sesame as well, and I was inspired by the gang. This gang of rebels, as Marilyn always likes to say. It's so true. They were at a time where people were being asked to step up and to come up with ways that they could help change the world, and they chose television for children. I mean, it was revolutionary, to your question, Brian. I mean, it had never been done before, and it was a huge experiment. The government was involved. They gave them money. It could have gone terribly wrong if it didn't go well. And there's this wonderful moment with Joan Gans Cooney in the film when she said, and when it finally hit the air, because it was years in development, it was like a whoosh, she says. And from there, it just ignited like a fire.
I think sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, so Ellen was in and I was in, and then it was really just about us finding a director that could help shape this vision that we had of this amazing documentary.
The documentary I was thinking of as I was watching this was the Mr. Rogers documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, from a few years ago. And there's a moment in that movie where you see a bunch of like Fox News clips of them saying like, this is how Mr. Rogers has changed kids or has influenced them. And Sesame Street has its own share of like controversies and political backlash. Was there stuff that surprised you as you were telling this?
I, for one, had never been aware of this Mississippi story, that actually it was banned in the South because Black and white people were living together on the same street. And I also was very surprised about the Roosevelt Franklin story. I initially thought that maybe the white parents couldn't handle Roosevelt because he was too Black and he spoke too Black, but it was actually the Black parents. It was the parents of the Black children who didn't want that to be symbolizing their culture. So it was so many fascinating little subtle things that there's so many layers to this story. And what I know, speaking for myself, but I know these guys feel the same, we love that people think this is a story about Sesame Street and we're going to see the Muppets and all of that. And it is, but it's 100 other things that you don't see coming. And I think that's what we love the most, or that's what I love the most.